Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Tri-Caucus Plenary, working together for America's future.
The CHCI Congressional Internship Program brings Latino college students from across the country to Washington, D.C. for a paid internship in a congressional office or federal agency. CHCI interns get valuable hands-on work experience, but what really sets our program apart is our unique and comprehensive leadership development training. After graduating from the program, CHCI interns join the coveted Alumni Association, a network of thousands of Latino professionals spread out across the country, ready to support you and your dreams.
They really put quality time into making sure that your experience is more than memorable. They bring in great speakers, great events. The staff is great.
Like CHCI programs, CHCI internships are made possible thanks to the generous support of our sponsors, like Toyota.
The mission of CHCI is important to Toyota. Our support is key to the future development of Latino leaders.
For more information, please visit chci.org.
To start off today's program, please welcome Marvin Figueroa, Legislative Assistant in the Office of Senator Mark Warner, President of the Congressional Hispanic Staffers Association, and CHCI alumnus from the 2010-2011 class of Graduate Fellows.
Good morning. This morning's session will convene the chairs of 4 congressional caucuses: the CBC, the CHC, CAPAC, and the Women's Caucus. They will engage in a historic conversation about how do we bring the necessary change that we need to move our communities forward. And this conversation will have an impact beyond these 4 walls. So we encourage you to tell your friends, your networks, your family members to live stream this. And it's also intended to be a dialogue, not just a lecture. So we also encourage you to go to the microsite. Both sites are listed to my right. As an alumnus, I am also very proud to be part of this morning's session because we're honoring 2013 CHCI Distinguished Alumnus. The impact that CHCI has had on my life is undeniable. Without CHCI, I don't get to serve in the office of Senator Mark Warner. I don't get to have conversations about how do we reduce health disparities. I don't get a seat on the table when we're talking about education and making sure that everyone, regardless of race, regardless of place of origin, can achieve the American dream. Without this fellowship, I also don't get to be part of the discussion when we're talking about immigration reform. So that people like my family from Honduras, from a small village in Honduras, get to succeed and get to live in this country with pride. CHCI has done that for me. And I cannot be so naive to believe that I've done it alone. But it's the collective efforts of communities like these, of internships like these, of fellowships like CHCI. So I'm honored to be here today. And I also want to say that it's because of people like Henry Fernandez, who manages philanthropic initiatives at the USA Funds, a nonprofit education company. He enhances college student access, persistence, and degree completion through planning, awarding, and managing grants to post-secondary institutions. He's also an alumnus of the CHCI program. In a conversation that I had, he said that the thing that he is most proud about is the fact that he's a dad. Please join me in welcoming Henry Fernandez.
Good morning, everyone. This is a fun part of the program. I'm very, very, very excited to present the award to my fellow alums. I can personally attest, as a former fellow in a year probably way back toward the start of CHCI, before some of you current fellows were born, I can attest that CHCI gave me the experience, the skills, and most importantly, the confidence to go back to my community and make a difference. Thank you, CHCI. Well, the Medallions of Excellence for a Distinguished Alumnus recognizes a CHCI alumnus who has made an outstanding contribution to the Latino community and who has thereby achieved distinction. This prestigious annual award is meant to highlight the impact of CHCI's programs and the prominence of its alumni. Those considered are judged on the full range of their professional accomplishments. This year's award is a little different, so let's take a look.
In 1998, the CHCI Alumni Association was created by a group of visionary alumni who understood the importance of establishing a national network of Latino professionals. This handful of CHCI alumni was instrumental in the founding and early formation of the association. Today, the Alumni Association is an integral part of the CHCI family by volunteering and mentoring for CHCI program participants, promoting alumni support towards CHCI, providing professional development opportunity for its members. This year, the CHCI Alumni Association is proud to celebrate its 15th anniversary, its quinceañera, boasting over 2,700 members and 8 regional chapters. To highlight this important milestone, CHCI is honoring the CHCI Alumni Association's founding members with the coveted 2013 Distinguished Alumnus Award. Congratulations, founding members, and thank you for your continued pledge to develop the next generation of Latino leaders through civic engagement and giving back to CHCI.
Thank you. Thank you. It is now my honor to welcome to the stage the CHCI Alumni Association founding members. And please hold your applause until I call all the names. Join me on stage, please. Miguel Gonzalez, founding president, fellow 1993-1994. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Miriam Granton Gerdine. Okay, she's not here with us right now. Rodolfo Anthony de Leon. Naomi Barry Perez. Alejandra Ceja. And Paloma Santiago Adorno. A couple of alumni who couldn't join us today, I still would like to recognize. And they are Gabriela Gomez and William Ayala, Yara Alma Bonilla, and Miriam Granton Gerdine. Okay? So thank you very much. Oh, just a minute. Esther, I was going to take a picture with her. I'd like to welcome to the podium Miguel Gonzalez, who's going to say a few words on behalf of the Alumni Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Henry, for the kind introduction. Thank you, Luis Campillo, also President of the CHCI Alumni Association, for your leadership. Thank you so much for all the alumni who have been working very hard to keep the Alumni Association going over the past 15 años, the quinceañera. We definitely are excited. I should not be speaking here on my own. I wanted to bring everybody and share the stage with me, but they voted me down and they wanted somebody to speak. So here I am, and I'm not sure why they elected me to speak today, but thank you guys. I appreciate it. So first of all, let me kind of address the elephant in the room, and pardon the pun, because many of our alumni are public officials. They are people who work on Capitol Hill. The congressional fellows who are here for the next 9 months, their jobs are I think are in jeopardy perhaps due to the shutdown. There are many folks here, I think, who are not with us, including Gabby Gomez, who perhaps I think is deemed an essential personnel. So due to the shutdown, she couldn't be here today. It's unfortunate that this has have to happen here during this fellowship and during this internship for you guys, because I think you are exposed to some unfortunate dysfunction of government. I hope that it doesn't make you jaded at all. I hope you continue to enjoy the fellowship and internship over the next 9 months or so. So, 15 years, 15 años. That's a long time. I know you were about 15 years old, Alejandra, maybe, give or take or two. Let's go back in time real quick and see how that plays out over the next 15 years. Bill Clinton was president. 2 years earlier, in 1998, the Republicans had just shut down the government, and it sounds like they learned their lesson. Hashtag joke. President Obama was a state senator in Illinois. Titanic was the movie to see. It won 11 Oscars that year. If you don't know Titanic, you guys might want to Google it right now since you're... the last episode of Seinfeld, raise your hand if you know who Seinfeld... Oh, okay, so we have a really well-educated group here. Thank you. That's the year that the last episode of Seinfeld aired. Frank Sinatra died that year. The Internet, as we know it, was in its infancy. Social media was kind of a foreign underground concept. No Facebook, no Google, no Twitter, no Instagram. Only faxes, email, and pagers. You guys know what a pager is? Yeah? Okay. All right. So we are... And in 1988, this wonderful and talented group of individuals came together to form the Alumni Association. I was fortunate enough to have been selected as its first president, and the friendships that I have made over the years are invaluable to me. I know many of these fine folks. So today we celebrate our 15 años, our quinceañera. In addition to the more than 2,700 members that we have throughout the United States, we have chapters in Washington, D.C., Boston, Chicago. Anybody from Chicago? Dallas? L.A.? Man, siempre Los Ángeles, man. New York? Phoenix? Hey. And Wichita, Kansas. I'm just kidding. That's where I'm from. But we will establish an alumni chapter one day there. Hashtag joke. Again, today we count among our ranks elected officials in state houses, city councils, school boards, judges. We have corporate leaders, community leaders. We have many, as I noted earlier, public servants in the White House and important federal agencies here in Washington, including our very own here who are standing with us. We have lawyers, accountants. Not that we need more of those, but we still count them in the ranks. So it's a very impressive group of accomplished professionals. We continue to fight hard to make sure that we deliver on the promise of developing the next generation of Latina and Latino leaders. So it's been a great 15 years, and I hope that we continue to fight hard and push hard. And here's to the next 15. Muchas gracias.
So our moderator needs no introduction. She is a principal at the Dewey Square Group, the founder of Latino Ovations, and a CNN and Espanol political contributor. She has more than 2 decades of experience in public policy, in government, and community relations. During the 2008 Democratic primary, she was senior advisor and spokesperson to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. Please welcome Marcia Cardona.
Buenos dias. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I am thrilled and honored to have been asked to moderate what is going to be a historic conversation with Congressional Caucus Chairs and the Women's Caucus to talk about the strength of collaboration, to talk about the power that exists in coalitions. And before I introduce our amazing panel, I just want to give you all 4 pieces of information and statistics that really underscore what we have with us today in terms of the representation of what is the face of America in 2013. So in 2012, we saw the African American community come out to vote in historic numbers. 66% of African Americans came out to vote. They surpassed every single demographic, including whites. It's a historic achievement, and we should all want to do the same thing. Latinos, we all have talked about the historic growth of the Latino vote. Today, Latinos are 1 in 6 Americans. In 2050, 1 in 3 Americans will be of Latino descent. The Asian Pacific American community is actually today the fastest growing community in the country. And with that kind of growth comes real clout. Women represented 53% of the electorate in 2012. Ladies, what can I say? We just rule. So please help me in welcoming an amazing panel this morning. I will start with our first guest, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Chair, Congressman Rubén Hinojosa. Congressman Hinojosa was elected in 1996, serving his 9th term as a U.S. representative for the 15th Congressional District of Texas. He's regarded as a champion for the disadvantaged and has distinguished himself as a strong advocate for education, housing, and economic development. His primary goal in Congress has been to reduce the chronic unemployment rate in regions of the district. Congressman, thank you for everything you do. Yes, give him applause. Thank you. Our next panelist is the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Congressman Chaka Fattah. Please join us, Congressman. He's serving in his 10th term in the U.S. House of Representatives and is a senior member of the House Appropriations Committee, responsible for setting spending priorities for over $1 trillion in annual discretionary funds. He's also chair of the Congressional Urban Caucus, a bipartisan group of 47 members representing America's metropolitan centers who work collaboratively with other stakeholders to address the unique challenges facing America's urban communities. Let's welcome Representative Chaka. Next, I'd like to invite the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, Congresswoman Judy Chu. Congresswoman Chu's career began as an educator. She taught psychology at Los Angeles City College and East Los Angeles College for 20 years. While serving in the California State Assembly, she introduced and helped pass the most successful tax amnesty bill in the nation, which raised $4.8 billion in revenue for the state budget without increasing taxes. She was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in July 2009, and on her very first day in office, she worked through the night during a marathon debate to help pass President Obama's health care reform bill. And that deserves applause. Thank you. And then next, we have someone who will be joining us shortly. I believe she's on her way, if she's not here already. The chair of the Women's Caucus, co-chair Representative Donna Edwards. Congresswoman Edwards, yes, thank you. Congresswoman Edwards has enjoyed a diverse career as a nonprofit public interest advocate and in the private sector on NASA's Space Lab projects. In 1994, as co-founder and executive director of the National Network to End Domestic Violence, she led the effort to pass the Violence Against Women Act that was signed into law by President Clinton. Thank you. She has secured a number of legislative accomplishments to improve the lives of working families in her congressional district and around the country, such as the Maryland to the After School Suppers program and youth development programs in schools located in low-income areas. So when she gets here, we will give her a nice round of applause. We'll do it now as well. So now I will join the panel. And before we open up to what I know will be a very robust discussion, I do want to give a chance to our distinguished panelists to give us some opening remarks on what you see are the biggest strengths and what we are working together for, and what you all specifically think are the major issues that are facing us today. And let's start with Congressman Hinojosa.
Maria, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am delighted to see such a large attendance this morning. Judy and Chuck and I and Donna finished our work at 1:30 a.m. at the Capitol. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to rest enough to wake up at 6 and get myself here for this event. But seeing you has energized me and makes me so happy that we are having a dialogue on how we think we can move forward and continue the progress that has been made in the minorities communities. I want to say that there's a lot to be learned, and I can tell you that January of 1997, when I was assigned a seat on the Education and Labor Committee right next to my good friend Chaka Fatah, I started listening to him. I started learning from him, and I made up my mind that he would be one of my mentors. And as a result of that, we have come a long, long way. And we're going to share with you how we have learned to work together and how that can apply to your respective communities, to the regions that you represent, and that it is doable. So with that, I think I'd yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. Let's continue with Congressman Fatah.
Buenos dias. Good morning. Let me say a couple of things. One is that I'm here because of my deep love and friendship for Rubén Hinojosa. We have worked together from his first day in the Congress, and everything that I've been able to achieve is because of the partnership that we've had. When we built the Gear Up program, which has helped more of our young people in both the Latino and African American and poor communities in our country going to college than any other program ever created. It was because when I went to Rubén and said, look, I need support, he says, I will get you every member of the Hispanic Caucus on board with this program. And he was a man of his word. And then we worked together later on. You can give him a round of applause. And then we worked together later on when I sponsored President Obama's main initiative around college in terms of the tuition tax credit. And again, now, this has helped some 14 million families, Gear Up, 12 million families. In both cases, it's because of the strengths of working together. And we are in separated minority communities, but when we work together, we represent the majority viewpoint in this country, not just in terms of the future of the way the demographics work, but in terms of the spirit of moving our country towards a more perfect union. And so I think that we have to focus on the critical issues. It's difficult in this town. Sometimes we can get distracted on these side roads, but that the truth is, if we focus on education, if we focus on economic development in our communities, and if politically we work together. And that doesn't mean that there's going to be unanimity or that in every instance there's going to be absolute agreement on everything. But it does mean that we see our futures inextricably tied together. And as Dr. King once said, that we really are, a single garment of destiny, and we have many different variations, but that if we're woven together in ways that are meaningful, we can make real accomplishments. And Rubén and I's work in the Congress is a demonstration of that working together we achieve a lot more than if we would just go our own separate roads. So I'll always be wherever he is, even if it's all the way in deep South Texas. We are, and I'm a big city boy from Philadelphia, so deep South Texas is a long way from where I came from. But I've learned so much and have gained such an appreciation for the thirst, particularly for education, that the families that are represented in this room have, that we have a responsibility as a country to make a way, in some cases out of no way. We have to have a faith beyond the facts, but we can achieve, and we can achieve more together.
Thank you, Congressman. Well said. Congresswoman Chu?
Well, after a rough night, it's so wonderful to be with all of you at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. And it's wonderful also to be with my colleagues. And I want to thank Rubén Hinojosa for even thinking of this idea. It was his vision to have us all come together and be in front of you to show how important it is for us to be a coalition that can be a strong voice for change. And we are a strong voice that's becoming even stronger. You know, last November was significant because President Obama was reelected, but it was actually significant for another reason. It was the first time that women and people of color in Congress became the majority in the Democratic caucus.
Yep, absolutely.
We are a powerful voice, and it's so important for us to become a powerful voice because of the issues that we face. Voting rights. You know, our Congressional Asian Pacific Caucus certainly knows about this. It was the Chinese Exclusion Act that deprived Chinese Americans from becoming naturalized citizens and therefore from being able to vote. And that lasted for 60 long years in this country. So when Section 4 was struck down by the Supreme Court, of course, we had to join the Tri-Caucus in fighting that, in denouncing that, and also in joining in an effort to introduce legislation that will fix that part of the Voting Rights Act this year. And then there's health care disparities. We feel so strongly about that in the Tri-Caucus that we've made this the one thing we will do on an ongoing and rotating basis. And certainly we in the Congressional Asian Pacific Caucus know about that. Even though we are 50%, even though we're 6% actually of the U.S. population, we are 50% of the hepatitis B cases, which results in liver cancer, and yet it could be prevented. So we actually do a healthcare disparities bill and conference that we rotate between the three caucuses every year. And then, of course, there's immigration reform. Do we need our Tri-Caucus more than ever on that? We have to fix this broken immigration system. And I have good news on this front. Tomorrow we will be unveiling a bill that will be a result of our Tri-Caucus efforts that will have to, that will bring the immigration reform to the forefront. And yes, we will not give up until we fix this broken immigration system, but it will take all of us coming together. And this is an issue that affects all of us. So with our unity comes strength. And I look forward to a dialogue today, but also to working together with the other caucuses in the future.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Round of applause. I'm told that Congresswoman Edwards has arrived, so we would love to have her join us. Thank you. Good timing.
Welcome, Donna.
Perfect timing, Congresswoman Edwards, because you are up now.
Well, good morning. Buenos dias. It's very nice to be with you, and I apologize for my voice. I've not had a voice for a few days, much to the dismay of my colleagues over here. And good morning to them as well. I'm the co-chair of the Bipartisan Women's Caucus, and as you can imagine, a Congress that is fairly contentious at times. Part of the reason that the Bipartisan Women's Caucus formed was to try to get women, Republicans and Democrats, sitting around working on issues and at least learning about things in the same way, so that we could try to find some areas on which we could work together. And that has actually been true in a number of different areas over the years. My predecessor, who was from Maryland, was also a co-chair of the Bipartisan Women's Caucus, Connie Morella, a Republican from Maryland. And she describes the days when she was the co-chair of the caucus, and it was the women of the caucus who worked together on the Violence Against Women Act, the first Violence Against Women Act in 1994. I was working on it outside of Congress. But they really did work together on that. Now, things have kind of broken down over the years, as you can imagine. I'm sure you're not reading about that on the in the newspapers or looking at that on television. But I do think that there are areas of concern that we have as women. Working on issues of health disparities, for example, where we know that, and this is true in my district and across the country, that African American women and Latinas have some of the highest rates of some of the most devastating diseases and conditions in this country. And we have to try to focus in the research so that it really does get to our needs and concerns, so that when test trials are done, they're done on our communities, because our interactions with drugs actually may be different. And so those are areas in which we've worked, and we certainly experienced that. And Judy and Rubén can attest to that during the course of the last couple of years on health care. And then I would say there are other areas that are of deeply concern, particularly to the Hispanic Latino community, and that is around education, and most especially around STEM education. And so our Women's Caucus has been very focused on STEM education for women and girls, making sure that resources can go into minority-serving institutions, and we find those institutions all over, into places like community colleges, where so many of our communities are taking advantage of those opportunities. And I will just give you one example. I live in Prince George's County in Maryland, but out in Montgomery County, Montgomery College is the home to one of the most diverse populations anywhere. And it particularly is attractive to Latino students who are very focused in getting an AA degree first in some of our STEM fields, and then being automatically accepted into our four-year institutions in the state. And so as a Women's Caucus, we have been trying to really drive home this conversation about what it really takes to educate women and girls, and particularly focused on fields where there have been tremendous disparities, such as the STEM fields. And so I think I'll leave it there, and then we'll get to some conversation. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Round of applause. Esther, I think we need 5 hours to actually have the robust discussion with this amazing panel and all of the issues that we could be addressing. But I do want to address one issue that right now to me feels like the elephant in the room, no pun intended, because all of you have talked about how late you were up last night and everything that you're doing. And so I want to give each one of you a chance to address what this shutdown means for all of our communities, and specifically what it means for our active military and our veterans. I know that those are two groups that all of us in our different communities are very concerned about. And then in addition, if you could, and again, I know that you can't really quickly address this. You did a little bit, and you did too, Congresswoman, to Obamacare, right? We've heard so much about what this bill does and doesn't do, and I know that for all of our diverse communities, it actually gives millions of Americans in all of our communities the kind of protection and coverage that they didn't have before. Just as a quick example, it makes being a woman no longer a pre-existing condition. And I think that's important for all of our constituents to know, for the people who are watching us on the live stream, and for everybody to continue to communicate that out. So, Congressman Hinojosa, I will give you a chance first.
Let me take the first question regarding the active duty military and veterans. And I want to say that in anticipation of what happened last night at midnight, the closing of the federal government, we passed legislation that would take active duty military and that they get paid on time. However, contractors and civilian employees are subject to furlough. Veterans, on the other hand, have health care services, will continue, as will retirement and disability checks. However, other services like the VA loan approvals will be delayed, and I can't tell you how long. Depends on this shutdown. So with that, know that all of us are very concerned. We have tried very, very hard to get the other side of the aisle to accept the legislation that they sent us for a continuing resolution from the Senate and pass it in the House, and we would have continued to operate the federal government and do our work. But that didn't happen. So with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. Congressman?
I'm glad you put the two things together, because they really are tied together. That is that what the president pushed through is a law that, in many respects in this country, we've been fighting for almost 100 years, which is access to health care for every single person. And that starts today in 50-plus states and all of our territories. People now can, who are uninsured or were restricted from buying insurance because of pre-existing conditions, some previous illness or disease or chronic circumstance, can now have insurance at an affordable rate. And there's a resistance to this, and there was resistance when we passed it almost 4 years ago. And the people who resisted it then are still so upset about it that they organized an effort that created a government shutdown. It's like almost like a protest because of the Affordable Care Act. And they said unless the president walked away from this, then they would not provide the appropriations or the dollars necessary to keep the government functioning. So take your mind back. Almost 20 years ago, we had President Clinton, and he pushed through some major initiatives, and the other team was so upset about it, they shut the government down. So all I can tell you is that 20 years later, when people think about the Clinton administration, they don't think about the shutdown. The shutdown's terrible. Hundreds of thousands of people are going to be furloughed. They're not going to get paid. People are going to have services interrupted. Families that have traveled long distances to go into national parks are not going to be able to get in there. But 20 years from now, nobody's going to be talking about this shutdown. What they're going to be focused on is that for 30 or 40 million Americans, health insurance was being provided for the first time, and that never again will there be a shutdown of health care insurance and health care for people. And that's why we have to not be so upset about this momentary problem. This is a problem, but we're not going to compromise or equivocate 1 inch. Health care delayed is health care denied. We're going to stick to our position on this matter.
Congresswoman Chu.
Well, I just think it's a crying shame that Republicans in the House would actually shut down this whole government in order to deal with their own disagreements about one law. This is a law that was debated, that was passed. President Obama ran on this in his first term and ran on it in his second term, got reelected, and the Supreme Court upheld the law. This is, I believe, a law that we desperately need in order to make sure that everybody can get healthy in this country and won't be denied because of a pre-existing condition and won't face lifetime limits. So to shut down the government based on these kind of disagreements is just beyond imagination, and I think just terribly irresponsible. So many people will suffer. Thank goodness the active military are taken care of, but what about veterans and their services? What about the 800,000 employees that will now not know when they can go back to work or whether they'll get paid? What about the small business loans? Those who are applying will get turned away. In every sphere of federal government, people will find that they will not have the services that they are used to. And we lose millions and millions of dollars in lost productivity. So this is not right. This is not right for our country, and we just can't hold our country hostage.
Thank you. Congresswoman.
So obviously I want to echo the concerns that have been expressed by my colleagues here. I live in a district right outside of Washington, D.C. We are the home to NASA, NOAA, NIST, the Weather Center, the Census Bureau, the Department of Energy, NIH, so many federal agencies and federal employees. And I know that it is about services for the American people, but it's also about workers' jobs. In the metropolitan Washington region, something on the order of 400,000 workers are furloughed today. These are also workers who, because of the sequester that's been in place, have also already been furloughed many days. In a lot of instances, and I'll talk about my district, are low-income federal workers, actually. They're at the lower end of the scale. And so for them to miss 10 days because of furlough and then add this on top of that, and then three years without a pay raise, this does serious detriment to their families. In the county that I live in, we had some of the highest rates of foreclosure anywhere in the nation and certainly in our state. And many of those foreclosures were first-time homeowners who were new immigrant populations in my district. And they lost their homes as a result of the Great Recession. And they started businesses. And now their businesses are really challenged because if it's a business that is a dry cleaners, or it's a small grocer, or it's a restaurant, it's dependent on all of that federal workforce that's now on furlough. If they're the fastest growing segment of job creation in this country are Latina-owned businesses. Mm-hmm. And it's those businesses operating at the margins. It is those businesses operating at the margin, sometimes doing very untraditional things, that are in the most jeopardy because of this stupidity. And so, I feel for the services for so many people in my district. I think about there's a program, and I know there are some people out here from CASA in Maryland, but at CASA that services our broad immigrant population. They were just on the cusp of starting a primary health care facility at their facility not very far from here, and that is because of health care reform. Mm-hmm. And it would be the first time ever in that community where a primary health facility was available that's a community-based health program. This is revolutionary for health care delivery, and it means in those communities that rim this city that have the highest rates of diabetes and high blood pressure and the highest rates of HIV/AIDS infection and low infant birth weight and higher rates of infant mortality, that those communities will be served because they will have health care delivered to them. And so we can't allow our budget process to be hijacked by a group of people who just want to keep people in my community and your community from being delivered health care.
Thank you. Well said. So now I want to turn to an issue that I know is near and dear to the hearts of everyone on our panel, and it is also really key to how we ensure that our communities thrive and have success in the future. And that's the issue of higher access, or access to higher education and graduation rates. And I know, Congresswoman Hinojosa, this has been something that you have been working on for many years. So I would love for you to talk about what you think are the biggest challenges, because we know that minorities, while there is now record numbers of them in college, there is an issue with them staying in college. What can we do together as the diverse communities that we represent to make sure that our kids are able to get into college, but more importantly, stay in college and graduate and go on to good paying jobs.
That's a great request that you're asking me to speak on. But before I do, I want to share with you that I got up early this morning with only about 4 or 5 hours of sleep. They told me to give some good opening remarks. And I want to say to you that I was thinking, with all the wonderful sessions we have during this year's conference, I must say, I just might be the most excited about this panel because we're going to show you why we've made so much progress by working together. I'm honored to be joined by my colleagues representing the Congressional Black Caucus, the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, and the Women's Caucus. Our Congressional Hispanic Caucus has been very, very strong and has signature issues that have already been touched on, and that, of course, would be the reconciliation of higher education, the reconciliation of health care, and now our signature issue that we're fighting on is the comprehensive immigration reform. So I have believed that this is the first time we have ever come together at the CHCI conference. So I thank you all. Because
thank you for your vision in making this happen.
We are taking it to a higher level, and all of us are benefiting by this panel that is going to share with you. My vision for gathering all of us here this morning is to focus not only on some of the tremendous work we've done together, but even more than what we can accomplish when we work together and support each other. In answer to the things that we have been able to get done, Chaka mentioned Gear Up, and the area that I come from, elected in 1996, had 3 decades of double-digit unemployment, and I questioned why. I came to Washington, and I found out that we had been neglected for so long that the last president who had visited my hometown, my Hidalgo County home base, was Eisenhower in 1953. And so I asked the questions, why? And they couldn't really tell me. But the answer was that the appropriators and the leaders here in Congress felt that the monies that they had needed to be sent to other regions of the country. So we put together a strategic plan that we were going to focus on education. And I shared with you earlier that I sat next to Chaka when I first reported to work as a congressman on the Education Committee. And together we were able to work and get over 150 signatures in a matter of 2 or 3 months. And we went to the White House to see the Gear Up program signed into law. But in my area, as he said earlier, like it benefits the whole country, particularly the minorities, we were able to put together an application that gave us $45 million over 5 years to start the Gear Up programs. And in the second round, 6 years later, in the second round of funding, we got $85 million for the Gear Up programs. And the results is that instead of graduating 50% of kindergartners from high school, we have taken them, because of the Gear Up cohorts, to 82%. But that's not all. Let me tell you that we couldn't believe that the federal government, in 20 years before I came to Congress, we added it up. The aggregate that they'd invested in Hispanic serving institutions and historically black colleges and Asian American, all of us, minority serving institutions combined, $600 million in 20 years, the aggregate. And we wanted to know how we could increase that investment so that we would have many more college-ready students and get them into colleges and universities. And we sat together and we developed a plan. That time we were 77 members of the Tri-Caucus. And we developed a plan which resulted in an investment of $2.55 billion over 10 years that would be divided up so that the HBCUs got $100 million additional dollars that now equal a total of $300 million a year. And the HSIs jumped from $10 million to what is now $221 million a year. And the Asian Americans also had a huge increase. So, ladies and gentlemen, this working together is no accident. It was by design. It was a plan. And it's not easy to do. It's not easy to do, but if you do what we did, and they elected me to be the chairman of the Higher Education Committee, and some of the naysayers said that guy won't even know how to hold the gavel, much less lead us in the subcommittee for higher ed. Well, the end result is this story that I am going to close now as to what progress we have made. Pew says, the Pew Foundation did a study, and from the time that President Obama signed the law of 2010, Reconciliation of Higher Ed, giving us that $2.55 billion over 10 years, $100 million for the HBCUs, another $100 million for HSIs, and $0.55 for the other minority-serving institutions. We have jumped up the Latino enrollment in colleges and universities by 28%. Unbelievable.
Thank you, Congressman Hinojosa. There is true power in numbers. And now I'd like to welcome someone, a legend who understands true power in numbers, Congressman John Lewis. Could you please stand up and be recognized? Thank you for being here. Now I want to turn to you, Congresswoman Edwards, because you mentioned STEM. And STEM is something that is near and dear to my heart. I'm the co-chair of the Inspire STEM Coalition, which focuses on trying to provide more STEM opportunities in all of our diverse communities. These are the jobs of now. They're going to be the jobs of the future. Unfortunately, our communities don't yet have access to the proper teachers that are trained in STEM, to the proper programs. So I would love to give you a chance to quickly talk about what can we do working together as diverse communities to make sure that our kids have the same access to opportunities for STEM education and STEM careers?
Well, thank you. I mean, I do agree with Congressman Hinojosa that it really is about us working together, because when we're separate, we're so much smaller.
Yeah.
And our power in those numbers really gives us the capacity to deliver. Part of my background many years ago, I was a systems engineer working for the Lockheed Corporation on what is now a museum piece, which is Space Lab. And not to be confused with Skylab, because that's really a museum. But one of the things that I learned there, and I never thought of myself in school, I never thought of myself as a science student. Even though I always made good grades in science and math, great grades in science and math, I didn't think of that as my aptitude. And there wasn't necessarily anybody in my education arena who said, you should go in that direction too. Yeah. And it happened much later for me in life. And so I think about our young children and about the capacities that they need for the 21st century. And you are so right, Maria, that those capacities really are about developing skills, having the ability to experiment in laboratories. You can see the differences, for example, in K-12 education. When you go to a school in a neighborhood that is, doing really well and thriving, and you go to neighborhoods that are struggling, and they don't have the right lab equipment, they don't have 21st century laboratories and the ability to experiment in the same way as some other schools. And so it really does start there. And so when the president talks about investing in school construction, that's part of what he means, is creating 21st century learning environments for our young people. I think it also means that most kids make a decision by about 4th grade that they are either science and math students or they're not. 4th grade. And so we focused a lot of our STEM resources in the upper grades and even in college, having lost a lot of students up to 4th grade. And so I would say our real challenge is going from pre-K to 4th grade and really investing in STEM learning. And STEM learning takes place in so many different ways and in different communities. I was recently in a classroom where the teacher was actually, teaching about going to the grocery store and reading the nutrition ingredients on a label and using that as a way to teach science and math and technology, all of those things, by looking at a package in a grocery store. Well, for those young people, they were so engaged because it was something they could identify with. All of them, some of them had maybe been in the grocery store picking up stuff they didn't need to, but all of them had seen those labels. And so it's about also having people in the classroom who understand how our kids learn individually. I had a son who had learning disabilities. And so if I had just given up on him the way so many of our systems give up on our young people, he wouldn't have discovered that it turns out that he actually does have a real aptitude for math and science. And the way he gained that aptitude was learning music and art. That became the way that he learned math and science. And so I just think we have to be creative in the classroom, that we have to invest in the early years, we have to make sure that we're not saddling our students with burdens that they can't pay in higher education, so that they have the ability to pursue their dreams, whether it's in research and technology or it's going to Mars. And I think that we can take on those challenges, but clearly we have to do that collectively.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congresswoman. Congressman Fattah, do you think that on this issue of higher education, do you think that it's also our responsibility, not just as legislators, but also as parents and teachers and the adults in society, to your point, Congresswoman Edwards, do you think it's an issue of expectation? And what I mean by that is when teachers see a minority student, and this could very well be very subconscious, they automatically make that division that you were talking about. This is not a science and math student. What can we do to start changing that kind of thinking?
Well, almost all of my focus has been right at this issue, which is that what we have to do is we have to expect more of our young people. We need their teachers to expect more. And we have to create an aspiration that they're going to achieve at the highest levels, because then young people will meet those expectations. So, and we've seen this with Gear Up. So right now, this year, 650,000 kids in the Gear Up program, close to 40% of which are Latino youngsters, right, are going to graduate. 85% are going to graduate from high school compared to the national average of 75%, right? Yep. So we know that if we raise the expectations around college, around terminal degree programs, PhD, postdoctorate programs that they'll achieve, we need to tell our young people they're going to make $1.5 million more over their lifetime with a college degree than with just a high school diploma. We need to let them know that their seats in medical school and law school and business schools and engineering schools that are there for them if they are willing to work for it and they can achieve. I want to say something broader about this issue of partnership, though. This is not always going to be easy. There are going to be people pulling at us to try to separate out our interests. Yes. And we have to work at this. But if we work at this, the payoff is gigantic. And so there would be no Barack Obama without the organized support of very diverse communities, in particular, not just the African American community, but communities of color, the Latino community in this country. There would be no support for Hispanic serving institutions without the Congressional Black Caucus and key people. We're not going to go this path alone and be successful. And we have to work together. And even when we, people tried to pull us apart on immigration, we're together. And John Lewis is, he's not just a hero. He's been at the heart of making sure that people, so whether it's the labor community, whatever, our ability to have influence and power is going to rest on this partnership. And everybody wants to partner, and a lot of people struggle with the other part of that, right? We have to work together and make this go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman. Congresswoman Chu, I want to get to the issue of voting rights because it's a critical issue for everybody on the panel, all the constituents that you all represent, and combine that with a question that we are getting from our microsite, which is, in light of the recent 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, what can our communities do to work toward achieving Dr. King's dream of equality for all? Clearly, we all felt a blow with the recent Supreme Court decision on voting rights. What can we do working together as communities to right that wrong and to make sure that we work in unison to make sure that all of our voices are heard? Because we can talk about higher education, we can talk about employment, we can talk about how the shutdown affects us all until we're blue in the face, but until we don't come out and vote, right, that power is not going to be felt. So, Congresswoman.
Well, the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington was so important in reminding us about what was achieved 50 years ago. With people coming together and exercising their voices in such a magnificent way, we were able to change society for the better. And with the combined efforts of all of us, we can indeed make sure that things change for the better for us right now. And certainly with voting rights, that is so important. This removal of Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act is a serious detriment to our ability to be able to look at specific areas where we know that there has been a persistent pattern of discrimination. And so that's why we need to introduce another bill that will address those particular issues. And we need to be a united voice around this, because what is so fundamental to our power in society is to be able to vote and to be able to elect the officials that do represent us. So our power does indeed come with our ability to work together. Certainly with immigration reform, we see that is very much the case.
Absolutely.
There are those that would divide us or make us think that this is one community's issue and not the other. But in reality, our whole society benefits from immigration reform. Look at the economic benefits of the immigration reform. If we are able to get it, our nation will have $1 trillion more in reduction of our deficit over the next 20 years.
I think we need to continue to say that over and over.
Our whole nation benefits economically from the ability for people to get out of the shadows, to pay their taxes, and to contribute to this society. So this is the vision that we have to see.
I think that's exactly right. And we're going to take questions from the audience, but I also would like to underscore that what we're talking about here today, the power in coalition, the strength in collaboration, but to your point, it's not just our communities working together, but this is America working together. We are working on issues that benefit not just our communities, they benefit the country as a whole. This is the face of America today. And so, again, I just want to congratulate you all. You are a true inspiration and I think an example of what we all need to be doing better. So I want to give you all a round of applause. Yes.
Maria, I want to deviate from this program that we have today because we have an unexpected giant in our audience. I had the pleasure of being invited to sit in the very front this last Saturday of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual gala, attended by 5,000 people. And we witnessed the presentation of 3 awardees of the foundation's highest honor that can be paid to members of our country. And this gentleman, John Lewis, received the Phoenix Award. And I want to give him 2 or 3 minutes to just give you a message about the importance of what we are discussing here today.
Absolutely.
And how we can all work together by trusting each other and working, not getting everything that we want, but compromising, but for the benefit of the minorities community. And with that, I ask that a microphone be brought to Jean Louis, and give him a big rousing
I just don't know if there's
applause,
any way to
please.
get up here. Perfect.
What an honor to have you, sir. What an honor.
Good to see you this morning.
Welcome, Congressman. Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My beloved brothers and sisters, I'm delighted, very happy, and very pleased to come in so early, but really late, to be here and to witness this dialogue with my colleagues. Many years ago, when I had all of my hair and a few pounds lighter, I was head of something called the Voter Education Project. And it was our effort to help organize the Southwest Voter Education Project, working with the Hispanic population. And I will never forget two Hispanic political leaders in San Antonio, Joe Bernal and Albert Pena. And later campaigning with Cesar Chavez during the primary campaign of Robert Kennedy. And we had an opportunity to present Cesar Chavez with the Martin Luther King Jr. Peace Prize at Dr. King's Church in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So I got to know many members of this community. In the final analysis, we are one people. We all live in the same house.
Yes.
The American house, the world house. And we must work and struggle together to advance the progress of all of us. But no one can be left out or left behind. And we must respect the dignity and the worth of every human being. That's what we talked about. That's what Dr. King spoke about. That's what Cesar Chavez spoke about. Building the beloved community. And one day, and hopefully very soon, these colleagues here, we're all going to work together to pass a comprehensive immigration bill.
Woo!
I think I just happen to believe that we got to continue to push and pull and make some noise and not be afraid to get in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. When I was growing up in rural Alabama on a farm 50 miles from Montgomery and would visit Montgomery and Birmingham and other towns, I saw those signs that said white men, colored men, white women, colored women. And I would ask my mother, my father, my grandparents, my great-grandparents why. And they was, that's the way it is. Don't get in the way, don't get in trouble. But one day I heard about Rosa Parks. And I met Rosa Parks when I was 17. I heard the words of Martin Luther King Jr. on the radio. And the next year, at the age of 18, I met Martin Luther King Jr. Inspired me. I got in trouble, good trouble, necessary trouble. And the Hispanic community and other minorities, whether we're Asian American, Native American, African American, we must be prepared to make some noise. Speak up and speak out and get in good trouble. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. You were wonderful. Thank you. What a treat. That's great. What a treat. Thank you so much, Congressman. I would like to now take some questions from the audience. I know that we have some interest in asking some questions to our wonderful and distinguished panel here.
You know, Maria, while you're waiting for a question, one of the things that occurred to me, and I so appreciate John Lewis and all of us working to make sure that we can strengthen the Voting Rights Act, but I often think sometimes of voting as sort of like the lowest order thing that we do in democracy, and I don't want us to forget that after we cast our vote, what we do the day afterwards is as important as casting that vote on that day. Because I think sometimes when we let up on that, then we prevent ourselves from doing the thing that Mr. Lewis has said, which is get into trouble.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And making sure that our voices are heard. We are voting for a reason. And casting that vote, could not agree with you more, is not enough. We have to organize, we have to mobilize, we have to see strength in numbers. I agree. Do we have a question from the audience?
Hi, good morning, folks. My name is Fernando with Natural Resources Defense Council. So my question is, one of the most transformative experiences I had was last year. In undergrad, I would read a lot about the Appalachian and the poor working folk. I got a chance to work in the Appalachia of Nevada, in Reno, and Tahoe area. And so for me, it was very educational and transformative to work with poor white folks and immigrants, working class immigrants. So my question to you is, how do we take advantage of this, whatever metaphor you want to use, the melting pot, everything you want to use 21st century, how do we take advantage of creating an agenda that includes the real issues of working folks, immigrants, people of color, women, in light of what we see on the other side, and Ted Cruz, Rubio, and so how do we take hold of the agenda so that come 2016, 2014, we don't get trapped in the spinning of who's representing our issues?
Well, I think that in the design, for instance, the Affordable Care Act, or in the design of programs like Gear Up, I think you see the seeds of the way forward, which is that we have to design efforts that uplift people based on the country's needs. We're not going to be able to argue for a program that just helps African Americans or Native Americans or Latinos. We have to argue about how we have universal access to the ladders of opportunity in this country for anyone. So if you go out into Appalachia, you will find the same disparity in educational opportunities, in many cases even worse in rural areas than you'll find in urban centers. So we have to argue for, as we did working with, for instance, Congressman Mike Honda and I and Rubén worked together on the effort to create the Equity in Education Commission, Excellence in Education Commission. So we have to design efforts that meet these needs and that bring everyone on board. So the Affordable Care Act, even though it's going to have a tremendous benefit in communities of color, also has residents in the majority community in our country because many, many families have been denied coverage because of pre-existing conditions or have run across these annual limits or lifetime limits. So that's what we need to do, is look at how we respond to specific needs, but in a universal way.
Can I just add something to that? And Fernando, you work at the Natural Resources Defense Council, and I want to say that I thank you for your work, because I think in some of these places we have to put ourselves in those movements. And so, for example, with the environmental movement, so much of the environmental movement doesn't really fully engage with communities of color. And yet some of the deepest impacts of whether you're talking about climate change or use of energy resources and all of these things have a huge impact on our communities. I'll just give you an example. So in Maryland, we have a whole bunch of rivers that are poisoned. And they're poisoned because of conditions at, poultry factories and other kinds of things. Well, on those rivers, there are new immigrants who, because of lack of food security and others, are fishing in those rivers. And they're pulling up fish that are very damaged. They're cancerous. They're cutting off the tumors from those fish, and they're eating the fish because they're hungry. And so when there is not adequate access to food in food pantries, when there's not adequate access to a job that pays a decent wage so that you can take care of yourselves and your families, then you're subjected to the kinds of environmental degradation and damage that doesn't touch other communities. And so then when it comes to things, Fernando, like climate change, well, when it's time to move upriver or up a hill, people can afford it, will be able to do that. Mm-hmm. The rest of us will still be living down by the river with the sea, and places where the sea levels are rising. So I want to challenge us to inject ourselves into some of these movements where we are not, because they need your voices. And Fernando, I thank you for having your voice at the NRDC.
Thank you. I think what I'm hearing you say, Congresswoman, is that we should not wait for an invitation to get involved. And I think that's exactly right. I'm going to take another question from our microsite, and it is as follows, and I would love to give everybody just a very quick opportunity to address this, and then I also want, and then we're going to go into closing remarks because we are running out of time. So, as national leaders, and this is absolutely the reason why we're all here today, as national leaders, what measures can your constituents take as private citizens to further support the coalition building efforts that are happening on this stage and everything that you all are doing in your everyday posts to make sure that Americans understand that there is power in coalition and that there is strength in unity? Congressman Hinojosa.
I am delighted that this panel has covered so many subjects that are important to the minority population, particularly to the Latino community, because I think that this will prove to be one of the most informative panels that you will hear during this conference. If you want to get results, follow the lead of my colleagues and the recommendations that we together are giving you. I attended 4 panels yesterday, and one of them that really caught my eye that blends in with our recommendations is early childhood development and the importance of teaching children from cradle to age 4 years of age. How reading to children that early for 30 minutes every single night, that by the time that they are 2 or 3 years old, they can read the materials of that age level. By the time they're 4 years old, they can peck on a computer and tell you what they read. And it's that early childhood development that makes the difference, which I learned in one of the CODELs that I did to Finland and to South Korea and China, that they were successful in having such high graduation rates and so many students graduating from college was a simple formula that said early reading plus writing equals success in school. And so everything that we have said has that foundation with one thread that runs and holds it together, and that's parental involvement. When you have those combinations early and then continuation of parental involvement all the way to getting the students, young men and young women, to choose the right college for what they want to do the rest of their life, that kind of parental involvement results in great success stories. Even in just middle-class working families, in very low-income working families, it works. So I want to say that this opportunity that we have had to share with this large audience will continue. Will continue because there are so many exciting panels the rest of this day, such as the senators who did the negotiations on comprehensive immigration reform will be here to handle one of the panels on this immigration issue. The House of representatives of ours, like Luis Gutierrez, Javier Becerra, and others, will be here to share with you what they went through for 4 years in this negotiation. And then I have to, on a personal note, I have to try to sell something that follows up with what each one of you spoke about in STEM, and that is that we are bringing to you a STEM panel on how to recruit Latinas into the STEM careers with Chancellor John Sharp from Texas A&M University, who has an outstanding quarterback. And we have the senior vice president of General Electric. She will tell you how they recruit women into those careers and then hire them, and how they compete with other companies for such STEM graduates. You're going to have the representatives of Facebook, of Microsoft, of Intel. You're going to have some of the greatest minds in information technology there to show you how they compete with each other to recruit Latinos from throughout the country to work in their companies. So with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. Congressman Fatah, I'm going to start with closing remarks and then end with you, Congressman Hinojosa. If you could, in your closing remarks, tell us how we can help your efforts.
Well, the most important thing that I want to say is that you need to take action where you are planted, where you exist, whether in churches or in schools, colleges, community organizations, civic organizations, to build these bridges so that we can walk this effort together. And I think that one of the things I'd like to do, I chair the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and obviously my friend Rubén chairs the CHCI. We both have alumni groups. I think we should have our alumni groups get together and meet each other. We got 3,000 alumni.
Yeah.
Great idea.
I like that.
We should get, because there's only so much you can do with us older people, but when we get these younger people interacting, the energy and the synergy from that, I think will pay dividends for our country over the long term. So I think that in terms of going forward, what we need to understand is that alliances are great, but they are most meaningful when tested. That is to say that we have to be together when it's uncomfortable, when it's tough, and when it's challenging. And so that's going to be really the strength. We have to build a relationship that can weather storms and not just build a relationship for fair weather. So that's all I would say. And wonderful. We're going to work together. Me and Rubén are inseparable. We're in this together.
Absolutely.
Right?
Thank you.
Great idea.
Thank you, Congressman. Congresswoman Chu.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Rubén Hinojosa for thinking of this idea of having this Tri-Caucus plenary. And I want to acknowledge him because he is the inspiration to the Hispanic higher serving institutions monies. He was the one that had the vision to get that program going, and he is the reason why we have an Asian higher education serving institution. And that just brings home to me how powerful it is to have this Tri-Caucus effort going, because one effort can lead to another, and as long as we stand together, we can strengthen our efforts to making sure everybody has a higher quality of life and access to education and access to the American dream. I truly appreciate those efforts, and I hope that we can do it on a local level. On a local level, yes, there's so many opportunities for people to work together. And the question from Fernando reminded me of an effort in my home community where we're trying to get the San Gabriel Mountains to be part of a national recreation area. And it's not an easy process, but there was a coalition, the San Gabriel Mountains Forever Coalition, which said, look, Los Angeles is park poor, and we need to get those local communities that traditionally do not get involved in local efforts like that to be involved. So they went out, and they went to Latino and Asian immigrants. They got people who spoke the language. They told them that it was important to get involved and show them how to get involved, because I tell you, so many of our communities don't know how to get involved. Yeah. They don't think that their voice really counts, right. or that they can influence the outcome of a movement or of an issue, and yet they can. So what we need to do is to have organizers who can make that happen, and we can do it on a coalition basis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Congresswoman Edwards.
Well, thank you. And it's great to be up here with my colleagues. And I think You know, what Rubén and Shaka and Judy know about me is I'm a little bit of a rabble-rouser. And so, and I believe in the power of organizing. I truly do. And I think that elected officials, frankly, are only as good as you make them. And so coalition building, and I've built coalitions before, long before I came into Congress, coalition building requires intention. It doesn't just happen just 'cause. It doesn't just happen because you're thinking about it. It happens because you're working at it. It happens because you look around the table and you ask, who's not at the table? Whose voice is not there? And you don't presume that your voice is a substitute for theirs. And then you invite them in. You don't invite them in at the end of the process. You invite them in at the beginning of the process, because people like to feel like even if they don't get everything they want, that they were around the table when the meal was being served. And so I just want to encourage you to be intentional about building coalitions. I look at my home state of Maryland, and in just a couple of years, we are going to be a majority-minority state. And that majority-minority is going to be African Americans, and it's going to be Asians, and it's going to be Latinos, and it's going to be the whole host of other people that make up this great fabric. And so our coalition building also has to be about building power. And that is, you know, running for our school boards and our county councils and our state assemblies. And, you know, when I'm ready, you can run for Congress too. But I think that when, as a woman, and I'm going to say this particularly to Latinas in the room, that we have to have your voice in the presence at these tables around leadership. It makes a huge difference. It makes a difference for you. To make the argument about why things might be different, not better or anything, but just different from the concerns that your brothers bring to the table. And so I want to encourage you to do that and welcome it, because, you know, I'm looking at a United States in, you know, say 2015, you know, 2020, that is just so different from the way that it looks now, because the power and the voice and the face of our leadership is all that different and all that better because of who we have around the table.
Thank you, Congresswoman Edwards. Congressman Hinojosa, wrap this up in a nice little bow for us.
I want to tell you a story as I close. I came to Congress in my very first year. As a freshman, I got a phone call from the White House, and the young lady said, "Would you have a moment to talk to President Bill Clinton?" I almost fell out of my chair. And he said, "I'd like to invite you to come down to South America on Air Force One. I'm taking 3 members of Congress and 2 senators and 5 cabinet members. And we're going to go to Venezuela, Brazil, and Argentina. And I'll be speaking to pretty large crowds. And I've chosen you because I want you to speak in Spanish and tell the crowds about 2 things that are important in the Latino countries that we're going to visit. That'll be on education and on small business." Well, I accepted, and what a wonderful experience as a freshman. We did the 3 countries in 14 days, and I spoke in 5 different settings when the president would introduce me. And after it was over, we're going to fly directly from Argentina to D.C., and he invited me into his office on Air Force One. And he said, "Sit down. I want to thank you for doing such a good job. You know your stuff on education, and you certainly know your stuff about small business. And I want to thank you. You were really, really good. What can I do for you?" And so I bring this story because as you build coalitions, you're going to sometimes have to work it from the ground roots, from the bottom up. And then there are times when you may try and try and try. And if it doesn't work, then you might try the second alternative, and that is from the top down. So I said, "Mr. President, thank you for asking. What can you do to help me?" Our unemployment is double digit for 3 decades, and we've never had a sitting president in the last 45 years. Could you come visit us? And that's how we introduced the problems that we had for HSIs not being funded. Just $10 million for 100 colleges, $10 million a year. Today we're at $221 million, and the HBCUs are at $300 million from the top down. And lastly, I got a phone call from our now President Obama, and he says, Rubén, Sunday afternoon around 8:30 p.m., he said, I called to thank you for your leadership as chairman of the Higher Education Committee. Thank you for your tenacity to get in the face of those senators who wiped out $2.55 billion for minority-serving institutions when you all had passed it in the committee, 44 out of 50 votes, 357 on the House floor out of 435. Send it to the Senate, and they said, what is this, $2.5 billion for minority-serving institutions? Take it out. We need that money somewhere else. So I went as chairman, and I got in the faces of about 5 members of the Senate Education Committee, and I made my point. And they said, you make a very persuasive case on this, and let me see what we can do for you. They didn't do a thing. So I went to the top. I went to the president. And he received the Tri-Caucus, 77 votes then, 4 years ago. Today we're 85, and when you add the Women's Caucus, over 100 votes. And I said, Mr. President, but for this $2.5 billion to invest in minority-serving institutions, we cannot help you. If you don't put it back into the law, into the legislation that would become law, we cannot help you with health care. We had a discussion in the White House, and he said, Hinojosa, I'm giving you my word. We shall put the $2.55 billion for MSIs in the final bill, and I'll invite you to come and witness the signing of the legislation into law. All of that happened because of President Obama, and that's why we love him and respect him. He gives us education, health care, and he gives us the things that we need to make better quality of life. So with that, I yield back.
Great. Thank you so much. This has been such a terrific and a historic conversation, and I hope it's the first of many. I want to thank everyone on the stage. I know you all have very busy schedules, especially with what we're going through now, so thank you for coming.
Let's thank Marcia for the wonderful work that she did.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. I appreciate it. And we're done. I just want to do some quick announcements. Don't forget to follow CHCI on Facebook and Twitter. Also follow all of our distinguished panelists. You can follow me at Maria T. Cardona as well. Tell your friends and family so they don't miss out on all of these great discussions. Please join us this afternoon for the Freshman Congressional Class Luncheon, and then tonight at Reyes of Comedy. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you, Congressman. You were wonderful. That was terrific. Thank you. That was really fun with you guys. I swear we need 5 hours. Thank you. You really kept it going. Thank you so much.
Ahora que no estás, vibran remotas sombras mientras fuma el volcán en el